Miss Lizzie. I don't ever smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditsies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and I am super excited to talk about today because my spouse is superhero Superman, so we're going to talk about Superman wars, and I believe my spouse is listening, so he wants to know a little bit about these Superman wars. We're going to talk about that with William Bernhardt, who is also the founder of Writers Column. So we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today on Tea Time. We're going to talk about friends, family, art. That is the TBR serving that William has given me. So we're going to talk about that. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz rolls. Let's get over to all those platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Clapper, Lemonade, Blue Sky, all those good platforms. And the ones I haven't mentioned, Miss Liz on all of those as well. Jump over to the podcast apps: Podbean, iHeartRadio, Listen Notes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Spreckle, all those good platforms as well. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe, because these tea times do make a difference for the guests and for listening audience that resonate with the topics that we bring to the table. And also jump over to babyboomers.org. Miss Liz has been partnered with them for about 3 years now. And if you're looking to be featured on different podcasts, there's over 50 different podcast hosts that are featured on babyboomers.org. Check those guys out as well. There might be a flavor that you're interested in listening to. And I always like to support all of my colleagues out there that have an amazing podcast. So let's get started with disclaimer and then a beautiful intro, and then we're going to get William in here and we're going to spill some tea and have some fun today. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where stories remind us that justice, courage, and imagination all begin with one powerful question: what if? Today's guest has spent decades captivating readers through legal thrillers, unforgettable characters, and stories that challenge us to think more deeply about justice, humanity, and the choices we make. Of Red Sneaker Writing Center with more than 50 published books. William has become one of the most respected voices in legal fiction while mentoring thousands of inspiring writers around the world. Today, we're celebrating his latest novel, The Superman Wars, a thought-provoking story that explores power, heroism, responsibility, and the timeless questions of what truly makes someone a hero. Throughout his remarkable career, William has shown that great stories don't simply entertain, they encourage readers to ask difficult questions, challenge assumptions, and discover new ways to see the world. Today's Tea Time will explore the inspiration behind the Superman Wars, justice, ethics, and storytelling, building unforgettable characters, and the craft of writing and creativity, and what if truly means to be a hero. William reminds us that every great story begins with curiosity, and every hero's journey begins with a single courageous choice. So grab your cup and join us for an inspiring conversation filled with imagination, wisdom, and real life tea, truth, experience, and awareness. Let me get William in here and let's spill some tea. Welcome, William.
Hey, Miss Liz, how you doing?
I am good. And yourself?
I'm great. Hey, can I just say one thing up quick? I know this was a slip of the tongue, but the Superman Wars is nonfiction. It's not a novel. I wrote it from Jerry Siegel's viewpoint, but it's absolutely every word of it is true. It's nonfiction. You
Got
had
it.
me there for a minute when you said at first, and his last book, and I'm like, what is it? But then you corrected that to latest. So, okay, latest is okay.
Last book, I'm done writing? Oh, no.
Yeah, right. I can take up painting now or whatever.
or paragliding, or I believe that is what
I've
your
done that,
hobbies
yeah.
are, right? So we'll get into all those little hobbies in a little bit. But William, let's get to know you a little bit before we get into all the books and all the incredible stuff that you do. Who was William as a little guy, and who's William now?
Well, this little guy always wanted to be a writer. That's not totally true. I am told there was I know there was a period where I wanted to be a librarian because I went to the library every day. It was easy walking distance in this small Oklahoma town where I grew up and fell in love with books. So of course I wanted to work where the books were. But then around the time I turned 7, I started to realize that these books don't just magically appear, they're not spontaneously generated. Somebody writes them, like that's their job. And I thought, well, that's the job I want. That's the coolest thing ever. So I started talking about being a writer, which didn't always play well in, small town Oklahoma where there were no writers and weren't many people who could tell me how to get there.
So William, how old were you when you wrote your first book?
Well, I've been writing it for so many years. I don't know. It was published when I was 31. Let's go with that. So
it's a good year.
Yes, yeah, good year. It's 91. My oldest boy, Harry, was born about 3 months before in August. And then my first book came out in December and immediately shot to the top of the charts. So yeah, I thought this was a heck of a good year. Everything worked out well.
So William, tell my listeners a little bit about who you are today.
Well, today I'm still a writer, and as you've already announced, I've segued with this last book from fiction to nonfiction. I've done other nonfiction books like the books on writing, which I think you mentioned, but this is the first history biography book. And so that's a big change of pace for me. I also run a small publishing company. No, I did not publish my own book, but I do publish other people's books. And I run a series of writing conferences called WriterCon, which you also mentioned. WriterCon, just in case somebody's trying to Google it. And we have an annual conference every year over Labor Day weekend and have other programs throughout the year, like the small group retreat, which actually is happening next week.
I seen all that. You got a retreat coming in July, and then you have the 19th annual Writers Con coming in September.
Right, September 4th through 9th, I think. Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City.
4th to the 7th is what I got on my paper. See, I did my homework. I'm a good girl.
Good job.
So William, let's talk about the Superman Wars. What started with the Superman?
Do you mean how did I get started looking at this, or how did Superman
Were you a little guy when you got into Superman, or were you the older Superman hero?
No, I loved comic books when I was a kid. I mean, I still do really, but I do read other things from time to time. But when I was young, I loved comics, and Superman was my favorite. I'm not even sure at the time I could have articulated why, but he was. Part of it was that his adventures tended to be more science fictional, and I loved that. He had the Superman title which were usually fighting with bad guys, and then the Action Comics title, which in that era was more science fiction adventures. He'd go to other planets and meet strange bird people or whatever. And I love those stories. And I think I also love the idea that here's a guy, like Clark. I was way more like Clark Kent than Superman as a kid, and still am. I'm even wearing the glasses today. But, this idea that you can seem to everybody else like this weak, sniveling coward and very unimpressive. But in reality, you're the strongest guy around. You're just keeping it to yourself. And I think that's really appealing to a lot of people. I mean, Superman's loved around the world, and I think that's part of it. Here's the guy with so many powers, he could just take over if he wanted to, but he doesn't, because he really doesn't want to. He would rather be meek, mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent and, stay out of the spotlight and then just kind of help people when they need it without taking anything or expecting anything for it. I mean, now that's a hero.
You know what, William, you're making me look at Superman in a different light, because I always had an issue with Superman. I was just like, okay, this guy is just too normal for me. But you explaining Superman that way.
What do you expect? I can say that because I'm an Oklahoman. Anyway,
but I always looked at Superman as like he didn't like Spider-Man. He had the webs, he flew around and everything. But Superman was kind of more to himself, which a lot of men are. And I think that's why a lot of men are drawn to Superman, because they want to keep that kind of second identity to themselves, right?
Maybe. I got to point out that Lois Lane was there in the very first Superman story. She was there from the start, and this sort of weird love triangle, where one guy is basically two sides of the triangle, depending on what outfit he's wearing at the moment. That was really pretty a genius level idea. There had been other heroes with secret identities before, Zorro, the Scarlet Pimpernel. But this idea of, the woman who knows both of them, but doesn't recognize it because he's wearing glasses. Okay, sure, whatever. But, but more importantly, that, she's exposed to Clark all the time, but she's crushing on Superman, not realizing that they're both the same person. I think that had a lot of appeal.
So, William, if you take off those glasses, are you turning into Superman?
No, I'm already there. Truth to tell, you probably can't tell, but my left eye is really swollen this morning and I couldn't get my contacts in. So that's why I'm wearing glasses. That's the only reason.
I was going to say, guys, I really have Superman here, but...
Yeah, whip off the glasses. And I should have put a white shirt on this so that I could whip it open at some dramatic point, but...
Well, William, we have a question here from Dawn for you, and it's, what first inspired you to become a writer?
Hey, Don, thanks for the question. What first inspired me to become a writer? The love of books and probably some weird neurological twitch that nobody really understands. I mean, this is just me. I don't think writers are really born. I don't think anybody's born with a writing gene that makes them better at scribbling down words. I just think it's a matter of how much you want it. We've all heard Malcolm Gladwell's idea about the 10,000 hours. You put in your 10,000 hours and you'll be a world-class whatever it is. And I think writing is very much like it. Nobody's first effort is very good. Certainly mine weren't. But you keep writing and you keep writing, and eventually your work is publishable. So what inspired me, I'd have to say, is just a love of books and thinking this is the coolest thing out there. My heroes growing up, even as a teenager, were all writers. So it was only natural that I would want to join this cool elite club of people making stuff up and writing it down.
So, William, tell me a little bit about your mentoring for writers, because with the Writers Con that you do, what do you offer during those retreats and the annual events? Is there different things that happen during those two events? Yeah,
very different. The conference over Labor Day weekend is, a big conference. We have a lot of people there, about 300 last year, and we'll have a bunch of speakers, over 60 speakers this year. We've got Oh, it's more than a dozen agents, a bunch now, because of course people want to meet pitch to agents. We have publishers, a lot of other people in the business who are there to help writers, and a bunch of writers themselves. Headliner, William Martin, a multiple, 12 or 14 time #1 New York Times bestseller writer of historical fiction. Lou Berney, Edgar Award winner, and I could go on, but it's a lot of people. And a lot of classes and a lot of chances to pitch or to consult with people. But to me, the best part of it is, you're surrounded by your tribe. Writers tend to be, I don't think this is going to be a newsflash, tend to be introverts. They'd rather be at the library than at some conference with 300 people. But this is what I always say in the opening ceremony: meet people, reach out, don't be afraid. These people all feel the same way you do, and they have the same interests. And there's going to be a time when you need to network or get second opinions or ask somebody a question. Speaking of the book, which is about Jerry Siegel, this is what he didn't have as a teenager during the Depression in a low-income family. He didn't have, his father passed when he was young. He didn't have anybody he could consult, and as a result made a lot of mistakes. I don't want anybody at WriterCon to make those mistakes. So, listen up, learn what you need to know, and make friends. That's the conference. Now, the retreat is a much smaller affair. I try and keep it to, enough that we can split up and have small groups, and I can actually read people's work and give direct one-on-one feedback, which, is really the part that I love best. That's when I really feel like I can be helpful. And like I said, we're doing that next week. Plus, we're going to this gorgeous resort not far from Tulsa, the Caneback Break Resort. So it's a good time to learn, and good inspirational setting too.
So during these conferences and the retreats, do you have publishers out there, editors out there, like so everybody in the writing field, right?
Right. Everybody. You can pitch to publishers. Now, you got to bear in mind that if you're wanting to pitch to the big guns, we call it the big five, the largest New York publishers, you're going to need an agent to do that. And that'll be true for a lot of other, even, smaller, but still significant publishers. Even Amazon Publishing, you've got to have an agent. So I can't fix that. But I can have a lot of publishers that don't require agents, and I can have a lot of agents so you can get them to pitch to the big publishers. So something for everybody, whichever way you want to do it.
Awesome. I'm learning so much about the writing world as an author myself, and I'm just like, I never knew about this. I never knew about the awards. I never knew about the conferences, the retreats.
Yep.
There's a lot of stuff out there, and that's why I love having guests like you on, William, where we can get that information out to the listeners who are looking to write a book or to publish a book, and looking for editors. That's why all these guests come to the table. They give you that information out to all of you guys. We have a question here from Kelly for you, William, and it is: did you always know legal thrillers would become your signature genre?
Oh, great question, Kelly. Definitely not. But bear in mind, like I said, my first book was published in 91. The phrase legal thriller hadn't even been coined yet. That wasn't even on the map. That was about the time that John Grisham's second book is going to take off big time. It's a few years after Scott Turow did Presumed Innocent, which I think is one of the best books ever set in a courtroom. But legal thrillers would come later. I just was trying to write a good book. My first effort was, of course, being an English major, to write something very literary. The Code of Buddyhood has been published since, but at the time, nobody was remotely interested. I thought, well, let me try something that's a little more, it's a genre fiction. So I thought mysteries. I didn't know enough science to write science fiction. I certainly wasn't qualified to write romance. But mysteries, crime stories, I thought I could tell. And of course, I said it in law firms and courtrooms because I was a lawyer at that time. And that was a setting I understood. Who knew how well that was going to end up paying off from the very first Ben Kincaid novel. Like I said, it was a hit. And then suddenly I had a publisher calling me up wanting to know when the next one was going to be due, which was a pleasant change of pace from the previous, I don't know, 10 years when nobody cared what I was writing. And suddenly the worm had turned. And he's right, legal thrillers became a thing, probably not as popular now as they were in the 90s, but in a way that works to my advantage, because instead of everybody writing them, there's a handful of people who write them who really know their way around the courtroom.
And I think that it's awesome that we have the legal genre, because you can put some real facts into your stories in that as well.
Sure.
William, I want to get into your book. I have the book here. I'm going to pull it up. So for the audio listeners, if you could just describe what we're looking at here. Let's talk about the Superman Wars and what people can find from this new novel.
Well, the Superman Wars is basically the story of Jerry Siegel, who is the 11th grader who came up with the idea for our first ever superhero, Superman. This is in the middle of the Depression, and a quarter of the nation is unemployed. It's tough times, and Jerry's growing up in a low-income family. His father dies when he's 17, and despite all advice to the contrary, is determined that he's going to be a writer. He was sending things. He got stuff published when he was a one-digit age and kept at it and kept at it, came up with this idea for Superman. What he really wanted was a newspaper comic strip, because at this time, the news, totally about face from today, but at that time, newspaper strips were the big guns in town. Everybody read the newspaper comics. They were so popular that during a newspaper strike in New York, Mayor LaGuardia read the comics over the radio so kids wouldn't miss out on the latest installment of Little Orphan Annie or whatever. And people were making real money doing that. So that's what Jerry wanted a piece of. And he spent years. So he had the idea. It goes through several iterations. That's all in the book. But eventually he gets down to the Kryptonian that we all know, the guy from the other planet who comes to Earth. And he got his best friend, Joe Shuster, to draw it. And they had all these strips, and he just sent them out and sent them out. Every syndicate in the book. And they all ultimately turn it down. It takes years, but they all ultimately, they just can't, it's too different. They're like, a guy is holding a car over his head. Sure. They just didn't understand it.
That sounds like a raging bull. Like he's mad. Like, something, he didn't get his oatmeal that morning.
That's right. So eventually, Jerry and Joe had been doing some comic book work. Bear in mind, the comic book in its modern form didn't exist until 1935. And that was due to a man called Major Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson, who had been former military officer and a writer himself. So he understood writers and writing. And to bottom line this, he never tried to rip anybody off. He never tried to acquire anybody's characters. He got what they called first serial rights, meaning he could run it once and then all the rights went back to the author. And Jerry and Joe had been working with this guy for 2 years, and he's been wanting to publish Superman since 35. And Jerry keeps saying, no, I want a newspaper strip. But finally, when he's exhausted all the syndicates, he says, okay, I'll let you run Superman. Maybe somebody will see it. Maybe that's how I'll get a strip. And unfortunately, and I'm not exaggerating when I say barely a heartbeat before that first Superman story is published in Action Comics #1, the Majors company is acquired by extremely dubious means by a man named Harry Donenfeld, who had mob ties. He used to brag about it, so I don't know why I can't say it. He was in tight with Frank Costello. He'd been a rum runner during Prohibition, and he'd been indicted twice for pornography. His primary interest in this comic book company was that he thought it was something he could publish and distribute that wouldn't be what they called a Sing Sing job, meaning you'll end up in prison. Comic books seem safe. What he had no idea was that literally under a year from the time he acquires that company, he's a millionaire. And that's all Superman money, because Superman is an instant hit. unfortunately, Jerry finds that in the process of getting it published, he's lost control of the character because he signed a letter agreement. People sometimes say that Jerry and Joe sold Superman for $130. That's not actually true. They got $130 for the first 13-page story. They were paid $10 a page. So that was payment for the story. Unfortunately, thanks to Harry and his associate Jack Leibowitz, there was also a clause in that letter agreement that said basically, by the way, all the rights to the characters and everything in this story now belong to the company. But there was no additional money given for that. So I would argue they sold Superman for nothing. It would, and that's what I would have argued in court too. Unfortunately, I wasn't around when the litigation starts. But bottom line is, Jerry and Joe don't own the character anymore. And yeah, they got a little bit of money in the early years, but nothing compared to what these suits who just bought the company at the last minute are getting. And the way they treated Jerry and Joe was just, I don't know any word for it other than abusive. You can, again, it's covered in the book, but there's 10 years of correspondence where Jack Leibowitz, who's running the company day to day, is just rude, he's cruel, he takes advantage of these young men's naivete and lack of business experience. He's constantly threatening to fire them, even though they've got a 10-year employment agreement. I don't know what the point of an employment agreement is when the boss is constantly threatening to fire you, but that was the situation. And Jerry did not like that at all.
So what can people get from this book after they read it? And what's the takeaway that you want people to get from the novel?
Well, I want people to see it as a cautionary tale because it is. We haven't gotten into Jerry's battle yet, but let me just, go in through the back door and say that this litigation goes on for almost 70 years. There are 3 different, iterations of it, and none of it goes very well for Jerry himself, but his precedent, the fact that he stood up and fought, established precedents that will in time benefit not only his immediate family, but other creators as well. That's why I've said this is the most important and influential creator rights battle of modern history, which, whether you're interested in Superman and comics or not, this is a story that is very important to everybody. And the bottom line, everybody who creates anybody, whether it's if it's writing or art, or you're creating original content for the internet like you're doing, you got to protect yourself because the vultures take a different shape and form today, but they're still out there. Why did you read 3-4 minutes of disclaimers at the top of this?
Right?
Because you're trying to protect yourself, right?
Well, and there's so much people out there that there's so much fraudulent out there that people are pretending to be writers and pretending to be authors and they're just putting titles in front of their names,
pretending to be publishers. Yeah.
Yes. So we have to put these disclaimers out. It's a pain to read that disclaimer every time I come on Tea Time, but I have to protect my guests, and I have to protect the people that are listening as well, to know that be careful and do your homework, like do your research. Podcasting, I find that we need to dig deeper. We need to start doing our homework, not just invite people on our platforms, but actually do the homework and make sure that they are legit. Because there is a lot of people that are not. I read a story yesterday that Black Chateau put out about people claiming to be publishers and stuff like that. So we really have to be careful.
It's everywhere. You were nice enough to mention the retreats. I'm telling you, almost every year, someone shows up who's given $15,000 to what amounts to a vanity press. They'll take your money, you'll get a book, but nobody's ever going to see it. They're not going to distribute it. They're just going to live in your garage you can't get the money back. You made the deal. And today, not only are there still vanity presses, many of them are aligned. They are a subsidiary of those big 5 publishing companies I was talking about. So if you're not in the know or have friends that are, it's really difficult to know if this is a legit offer or not. Although, let me just say this to anybody listening. If a so-called publisher wants you to pay them, run. That's not a real publisher. That's not how it works. I don't care if they call it a marketing fee or advertising or incentive or what they call it. Publishers should be paying you, not the other way around.
Well, it's just like magazine covers, right? When people do stories and they reach out to you, we can feature you in our magazine, but it'll cost you this, and this, right?
Right.
Who's reaching out? If you really believe in the person and you believe in the story, like write the story. I always tell them that, write the story. Let me see what you're going to offer me. And how come I've never heard of your magazine before until today? Or, you know?
I mean, it depends on the person. If you just want to frame that magazine cover and put it up there and think, hey, you know, my mom won't know the difference, so that'll look cool, fine.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, given the internet tools we have today, you could probably make that up yourself. You don't need to pay somebody for junk that won't get you anywhere.
Absolutely. Well, we have some questions that are coming in that I want to get out to you, and then I want to get back into the Superman Wars and all that good stuff that you're doing. William, this comes from Gerald. Which of the 60 plus books is closest to your heart? And I know this is hard to answer as a writer.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's The Florentine Poet. I mean, It's also the Superman Wars, to be honest. But since we've talked about that enough, I'm going to say The Florentine Poet, which is a novel I wrote a few years back, and it's lighthearted and fun, and it's about a 15th century. It's a novel. This is not history, unlike the Superman Wars, but it's really about what it is to be a writer and a poet and why we love those things. And I just had a great, I think it's my best work. It's not my bestseller, I can tell you that, but I think it's the best.
William, have you ever written a book where you're like, I don't care if it makes bestseller?
Yeah, that was this. That was The Florentine Poet. Or I've written 3 books of poetry, which, not to be immodest, but I got some of the best reviews of my life from those 3 books. Did I get the best royalty checks from those 3 books? No, of course not. It's poetry. You cannot feed your family on it, I promise. Maybe Billy Collins can. Nobody else can. But do I regret writing them? No. I mean, if you wrote it for the right reasons, you know, you had something to say and you said it, then that book is not a failure because it's still sitting on the shelf up there. And you did exactly what you wanted to do, and I hope it turned out well. So yeah, I think that's part of being a writer. I mean, I made a big pivot to nonfiction on this book, which I can tell you every agent publisher would advise against. They say, you know, they basically just want you to write the same thing over and over again until readers can't stand it anymore, and then they dump you and get somebody else. That's the way modern publishing works. Sometimes a writer just needs to write for themselves, make their own choices.
Well, we have a question here from Paula, and it's what keeps you motivated after publishing so many books?
Oh, that's not hard. I don't have any problem with motivation. I mean, this is what I do, and I love it. Somebody the other day was asking when I thought I'd retire, and I just thought, why would I retire?
Well, it's like at the beginning of the show, you're like, last book? No, latest book.
yeah, no, I mean, who knows? I might come up with something brilliant yet. At any rate, it's fun, and I can't imagine getting up in the morning and not knowing what I was going to do that day, you know, because there's always between the books or the publishing or WriterCon, I've always got things to do, and I prefer to stay busy. It keeps me out of trouble. And of course, the success of the Superman Wars has opened up a lot more opportunities. I know what my next 2 books are going to be now, and they're both nonfiction, and that's based on the success this is having.
It opened up a new door for you as well, because everybody said, don't do it, and look at you did it, and look at it now, you got 2 more on the go. We have a question here from Sean, is how has mentoring aspiring authors influenced your own writing?
That's interesting. You know, part of that mentoring would be the Red Sneaker books, which I think you mentioned in the opening. I've done 10 books on writing. I know that sounds awesome, but they're really pretty short. It's those. They're pretty slender.
Those ones in the corner.
but the idea is that, you know, didn't want to create some mammoth text that people would use as an excuse to not write. Instead, I divided it up on specific topics. So if you want to learn about character, you can read the purple one. And if you want to learn about plot, you can read the blue one. And you can read it in 2 or 3 hours and then get back to your work. I want it to inspire work, not to take you away from your work. And so that's why I did it that way. But the question was, though, how's it influenced my work? I think that thinking consciously about what I was doing, I'd been doing it for decades at that point, but when you start to sit down and think, well, what does make a good character? What does make an interesting plot? And become more conscious about it, I think that makes you better at what you're doing. That's one of the things I emphasize at the retreats is, understand what you're doing. This romantic idea, I'm just going to sit down and the muse will whisper in my ear and I'll just start typing something. That's really not where great books come from. There is a certain amount of planning and forethought that should go into it. And I think teaching did improve my writing. I've had people of all stripes and sizes at WriterCon, great top best-selling writers, and we won't be mentioning names, but sometimes the best-selling authors are not the best teachers, not because they're not good at it, because they've never really thought about it in the way that I just mentioned, like, what am I doing and how would I teach it to somebody else? And so the teaching part is kind of awkward. Their books are wonderful, but they're not necessarily the best teachers.
Well, we have a question here about characters. You started talking about characters, William, and it's between Ben Kincaid and Daniel Pike. Did one character surprise you more while writing?
Oh, what a nice question. Thank you. Just to fill in everyone, Ben Kincaid was the character in that very first book I published in '91 called Primary Justice. I didn't know it was going to be a series character, but what a gift. That book took off, and like I said, the publisher wanted more. We ended up doing 19 of those, and I've got a draft of the 20th, because how can you leave something at 19? You
Right?
got to round it off. But I had to set that aside so I could. Superman research ended up taking about twice, if not more, as long as I thought it would. And Daniel Pike, that series came much later when I'd been away from the legal thrillers for about a decade, and time had passed, and I thought, we're in a new era, really, a new generation. It might be fun to see what a character with a completely different personality would be doing today. So Daniel Pike is basically everything Ben Kincaid isn't. Ben Kincaid is really Clark Kent with a briefcase. He's reserved, he's a little insecure, if not neurotic, but he's smart and he's determined. Whereas Daniel Pike, at least initially, is much more of a showboat in the courtroom. The most fun was when the book is called Partners in Crime, where I brought them both together and made it kind of a buddy road story, letting Ben Kincaid age in real time, like I seem to do. So Ben's my age, Daniel's younger. And so obviously there are conflicts and clashes. That idea really came from my son, Ralph, who said at one point, Dad, you ought to get all your serious characters in one book, like a Marvel Universe movie team-up thing. And I thought, well, that's extreme, but maybe one at a time, that could be fun. So then I did Partners in Crime with Dan and Ben, and then I did another book, the one I just mentioned, Justice for All, which teamed Dan with another one of my series characters, a female attorney in Seattle named Kinsey Rivera. Was that the question? Why I know I started talking about Ben and Daniel, but what was the question?
Let me see if I can find it here. Surprised you while writing them? What character surprised you?
Everything surprised me about both of them. In Ben Kincaid, I was surprised that people embraced this character, even after legal thrillers, to use the term a previous questioner asked, even after that became a thing. I wasn't entirely comfortable with it because that wasn't what was on my radar. I didn't really read thrillers or know what a thriller was. I thought it was a courtroom drama with some mystery elements in it. But I started gearing up towards thrillers once I knew that's what everybody was going to talk about. But my concern was, of course, Grisham was the top of this genre. And FYI, he's a terrific guy who I've had a chance to work with in small ways on a couple of instances, and he's just a prince. But I don't think our books are very much alike. So I was afraid that people would read his and then come to mine and see how different they were and not like it very much, you know. But Ben, worries aside, Ben endured for a long time and he's still out there. Daniel Pike, when I started, I said, okay, I'll do 6 of these and I'll commit to a relatively quick schedule, but I don't want it to go on and on forever. And this is what I'm writing for the rest of my life. I'll do 6. Well, that didn't work out. 6, but the first 6 are a nice coherent whole. I just keep coming back for more. Can't stop myself.
So, William, do you always have even numbers for your series? Because you said 19. I had to go to 20. Now I got 6.
We are a base 10 world, aren't we? No, Kinsey only got 3 books. I don't know if this even counts as a series when there's only 2 of them, but I wrote, the first book was called Dark Eye, with a female psychologist working with the police, Susan Pulaski. And I would love to get back to that, actually, because that was supposed to be a trilogy and I never got to write the 3rd one. So that's another thing that I need to get back to do, but I would be content with 3, and that's an odd number. So I'll say no on that.
See, I pay attention, guys. I heard 6, and then I heard 20, and then I was like, oh, even. So for any of the writers out there that would like to do series, what's a number that they could stop at? Is there a deadline? Like you're on 19 for one series, so is 20 the deadline?
No, the only deadline is how much do your readers want to read this series character. I could talk for a long time about series characters. Publishers love them because it's the closest thing publishing ever gets to a sure thing, Like if this Ben Kincaid sold X many copies, then the next one will probably sell about that. There's not as much risk involved. Series characters are sort of plot insurance, because even if people aren't very interested in the plot you came up with for this one, you hope they'll think, well, I got to see what's going on with Ben, and what's happening, so I'll end up getting it anyway. And I think series characters are a lot of fun because you get a much broader canvas to paint on than you ever would from a single novel. And certainly that was true from Ben. What a blessing. And I didn't plan this in any intelligent way, but in that first book, Primary Justice, he's just out of law school. And the book opens on his first day at work at this big law firm he signed up with, which does not go very well, as you might imagine. But my point is, he's young and he's immature and he's not very experienced in the courtroom yet. So there was room for growth. There was an arc to take him on over the course of the next many books. And I think that's a lot of fun. I actually kind of enjoy, I wouldn't want to do it every time, but I like series characters, and I think readers do too.
What kind of goes into this question that Paula is, how do you know when a story is finally complete?
You don't. You just stop at some point.
You just stop.
It's never complete.
Put the brakes on. It's done.
Or deadlines here. It's done. Was it Truman Capote, I think, who said, books aren't finished, they're abandoned. And that's more or less true. At some point, you got to say, done. I mean, if I read it again, might I find something to change? Of course I would. But at some point, it's there and the book is in place and it's time to let it go and let other people enjoy it. I could have done that with the Superman wars, because it seemed like every time I turned around, something new broke or something new happened. We had a new Superman movie last year, and that caused all kinds of Superman hubbub and things going on in people's lives. But when the deadline hits, it's over. So you got to turn it in.
Absolutely.
The question probably came from an aspiring writer, or maybe someone who's published a little and wants, some good, like I could say 5 drafts and then you're done, but you never know. It's your own sense of when this is at least more or less mostly in place, and then send the book to some beta readers, some friends, or just associates who will give you an honest appraisal. I hesitated to say friends because if all your friend says is, "Oh, Bill, that was really great," well, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Except
You
maybe
need
to your
good
ego.
feedback.
It will not make your book any better. You need somebody who will look you in the eye and say, "Bill, this scene just doesn't work," or "This character doesn't make any sense to me," or, "I didn't like this part at all." If you get that kind of feedback, it's time to go back and write some more. If you have 10 beta readers and they all seem to like it, then maybe you're ready to send it in.
Let's talk about beta readers, because I haven't talked about this much on Tea Time. For my listeners out there, what are beta readers?
Well, the beta reader the idea is to have, I guess, the author is the alpha reader, but then you send it to other people before you send it into New York or wherever your publisher is to get second opinion. I remember when Philip Margolin, another terrific lawyer who became a writer, he came to WriterCon as keynote one year, and he said he has 10 beta readers. Why 10? Because if just one person has a problem with, say, a character, he thinks, well, that guy's an outlier. But if 6 people say the same thing, that's problematic. And then you need to go back and do something. I mean, if it were me, I'd probably do something just to fix the problem one person had, because I'm basically insecure and I want everybody to love me like everybody else. But, that's the point, to get some feedback. I don't care how good you are or how many books you've written. Authors can be blind sometimes, and nobody's going to see everything. And you just need a second pair of eyes, maybe third, fourth, 10th, to look at things, to pick up on the things you're missing. You get too close to it sometimes and don't see what's readily apparent to others.
Yeah, when you're too close to the project and the writing in the book, when you get the feedback, you take it personal, and you're like, no, I want this character and I want it written this way, or I want it that design. But having an outside eye come to the table is really good for you, because then it shows you the growth, right? It shows you to go back and dig deeper, or pull out because you went in too deep. Like when you're describing a situation or a storyline. I know when I wrote my books, I was told, back it up a bit. The reader will understand it. You don't need to put it into so much graphic detail, right? They'll get it when they read it. So pull it back a bit.
Let them use their imagination. I mean, that's why they're reading, right?
So, William, what was the first cartoon you read as a little guy besides Superman?
First cartoon, or you probably mean comic book?
Comic book.
In time, I would become a big Batman fan. And indeed, today, Batman outsells Superman, probably because there's been such a huge series of successful Batman movies. By a significant margin, Batman's the most popular superhero comic book character around today. But when I started reading in kind of the late 60s, you remember the Adam West Batman show, which basically played it as a comedy. And that infected the comic books for a while. And, even as a little kid, I thought, oh, this is stupid. I don't like this at all. I wanted it to be serious. But in 1970, that changed. The pair of Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams took Batman back to his roots as a dark creature of the night and scary avenger and whatnot. And that I liked. So at that point, I became a Batman fan too, which, FYI, is the subject of my next book.
Oh, so pay attention, guys. He's giving you some little Easter eggs over here.
Yes.
We have a question here from Bob, and it is, what's one writing habit you believe every author should develop?
Well, to some extent, this is going to depend on what your goals are, but most people I meet, would like to become professional writers. They're not just writing as a hobby or for therapy, but they'd like to be published and like it to do well. And the advice I would give you is write every day. Even if you have a day job, most writers do, sometimes even after they publish, and there's nothing wrong with that, but write every day, even if you're busy, even if you're raising kids or cats or whatever you've got. There's got to be some time you can find. When I was practicing law, I used to get up early, but I'm a morning person, so that worked okay for me, and I could write a couple hours before I went to work. Other people stay up late and write. Whatever. The point is, keep the book in your head. If it's something you just look at every other Tuesday, you're not going to get very far because you're going to spend most of the time just remembering what the book's about. Yeah. But if you write every day, the book will stay in your head. Your subconscious will be working on it even when you're not. So when you sit down and write, instead of spending an hour gazing out the window trying to figure out what happens next, you're ready to rock and roll, and that's how you get a book. I mean, if you think about it, even if you only write 3, 4, let's say 5 pages a day, because that'll make the math easier. Even if you only write 5 pages a day, you can have if you do it every day, you could have a first draft in 3 or 4 months. And sure, that first draft is going to need a lot of work, but you're a lot further ahead than you were before. And now you can go back and do the second draft, which will take less time. And the third draft, which will take even less time, I hope. And on like that until finally you get the work done. Treat it like a job. If you want it to be a job, treat it like a job, not a hobby. Write every day and don't quit. It is very easy to get frustrated because writing is hard. And many times you'll think, oh, I must be the worst writer in the world. You're not. Writing's just hard. Don't quit. Stick with it. Put in your 10,000 hours. You can do this if you don't quit.
William, I want to talk to you about your hobbies, and then I want to get into your tea before we wrap up. We're almost at the end here. I want to talk about the paragliding and surfing, and also Jeopardy champion. So tell us a little bit about all of that good stuff.
Oh, well, what is there to say? I went surfing. I have pictures. I can prove it.
I was on the board.
Paragliding doesn't really require any skill. You just hang there. Scuba diving, fun. But Jeopardy, that does require some skill, mostly just to get on the show. And I did, and it turned out okay, although I was in my mid-50s by the time I made it. And not making any excuses, I did win, but let me tell you, I was the oldest person in that green room by probably 20 years, and that does matter. I at the rehearsal, I kept ringing in, and of course, I never got in because I wasn't quick enough. The kids were beating me out at every time. At one point, the producer came up to me during the rehearsal and whispers, "Bill, are you trying to ring in?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm trying to ring in, but it's not working." And I thought, oh,
it's not fast enough.
Yeah, this is going to be a disaster, but it turned out okay. The biggest thrill, of course, was just getting to stand on that stage. I've been watching Jeopardy! True since I was 4 years old, and now I got to do it, and I got to meet Alex Trebek, and how cool was that? That was a great experience.
So that was kind of like a little childhood dream.
Yeah, it really was. That was like publishing a book and creating crossword puzzles. That was a bucket list item that I was very glad to complete.
Well, William, I want to get into your tea because the words that you gave me was family, friends, and art. Why'd you give me those 3 words for your tea?
For my tea? I forgot, what does TEE stand for?
It's your story.
It's an acronym, isn't it?
Yeah, it's your story, your words.
Family, friends, art, did I say?
Yes.
I'm probably trying to tell you what is most important to me, although it should probably be family, friends, art, and cat. But I mean,
he's
family comes first. And that ties back into Jerry Siegel's story in the Superman Wars, because as I said, there's 70 years of litigation starting Jerry served in World War II, and he comes back and finds out not only have these guys taken over the whole Superman operation, they've run a script of his for a character called Superboy that they didn't even buy. They had no legal right to at all. They turned it down. And then when he's overseas serving his country and can't do anything about it, they run it anyway, which is why he sues first in 1947, which only results in him being fired. And worse, they remove Jerry and Joe's credits from the Superman feature, which we could argue about the legalities all night long, but erasing their credits, that's just wrong. That's just morally and ethically wrong. And he suffered a lot of hardship. It's in the book, but I don't want people to think that this is going to be a depressing read, because it's not. Because what happens? Jerry gets his wife, Joanne, who, by the way, was the original model for Lois Lane, and she becomes the agent he never had. And even after Jerry passes in 96, she continues the fight all the way up. Those guys are still deposing her when she's 93 years old, for Pete's sake. They are clearly just trying to drag this out. And when she passes, their daughter Laura takes up the fight, and it's not finally resolved until 2016. But it is a triumph for family, and to me exemplifies the power of a family that sticks together. Now, Jerry's family is doing okay, and that's because they stood together and fought for what they believed. And not only has it benefited them, but it's benefited many other creators in the comic book world and other realms as well, just because Jerry Siegel was the first American writer to stand up and sue his publisher.
Sometimes you got to.
Yeah.
You
Well,
got to fight.
he
fight
thought
for
so. He thought the whole artistic community would rise up and support him. That did not happen for a long time. If I have time, I like to tell a story about Jack Kirby, one of the most famous comic book artists, particularly at Marvel in the 60s. And back in 51, when Jerry's writing a series of really out there letters trying to get people to pay attention to his story, Kirby and Joe Simon send a letter to DC saying, well, we just want you to know we don't approve of this stuff Jerry Siegel's doing. I mean, he thought they'd support him, and instead nobody supports him. They're just sucking up to the boss. Flash forward 4 decades. Guess who's suing now? It's the Jack Kirby estate, and they're bringing the exact same claims because now Jerry Siegel's family has proven they can be profitable. They even hire the same attorney to represent the case. So, like I said, Jerry's fight benefited a lot of people later on, even though he went through much trouble himself to establish those precedents.
So, William, I'm going to pull your book up. Where can people get your book and all that good stuff? And again, the dates for the retreat and the Writers' Comp, so people can check that out as well. And then your final message to all the listeners.
I think you can get the book pretty much anywhere you get books, at your local bookstore, or if they don't have it, you should complain bitterly. I know you can get it online. Those I can check because, like every other obsessive author, I go to my Amazon page and keep reloading it to see if my ranking has gone up half a point or whatever. It seems to be doing very well there. So I don't think it's hard to find. WriterCon, the conference, is Labor Day weekend. That's September 4th through 7th in Oklahoma City. And the retreat probably might be too late to get on board for next week, but we'll do it again next year. And the website for that is writercon.com, just WRITERCON.com. And you can read all and learn all about that.
And if anybody wanted to reach out to you, William, how could they reach out to you?
You can reach me through my website, which is williambernhardt.com. There's some kind of contact chatty thing in there. And I love to hear from people, so feel free to email me.
And what's your final message to everybody today?
Well, my final message to creators would be, like we were saying before, protect yourself. I mentioned vanity presses. we've got all kinds of AI scams going on right now. Every morning I have to wade through 10 or 15 emails that look very legit, because of course those AI programs have already scraped your book, or they've scraped an interview, so they know all about everything and want to sell you or sell you stuff or collect your contact information. Those are just scammers, and you need to stay away from them. You've probably heard about the Anthropic lawsuit, which, you know, props to them. They set aside a fund to compensate authors, but now some authors are finding they can't collect because their publisher didn't copyright the book or didn't get a Library of Congress number. Don't depend on other people, writers. Do it yourself. And don't believe everything you see in your email. Ask a writer friend, preferably one you met at WriterCon this year, and never sign anything without getting a second opinion from somebody who knows what they're talking about. Protect yourself. Don't let what happened to Jerry Siegel happen to you.
Well, thank you so much, William. Thank you for having this conversation with my listeners today and bringing your book to the attention of all of these incredible listeners that joined us. I could not do this without all of you guys. I'm just going to do a quick recap of what today's tea time was, and I'll be back at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again. What an incredible conversation we've shared today. William, thank you for bringing your creativity, wisdom, and decades of storytelling experience to the tea time table. Your work reminds us that stories have the remarkable ability to entertain, while also challenging us to think more deeply about ourselves and the world around us. Today, we explored writing, justice, heroism, creativity, and the ideals behind the Superman wars. We discovered that true heroes aren't always defined by extraordinary powers, but by the everyday choices that they make with integrity, compassion, and courage. One of the strongest takeaways from today's conversation is this: the greatest power any of us possess is the power to choose how we respond to the world around us. Through your writing, you're invited readers to question assumptions, embrace curiosity, and recognize that every person has the ability to make a meaningful difference in someone else's life. As we close today's tea time, I leave everyone with this thought. If you were writing the next chapter of your own story today, what kind of hero would you choose to become? Because heroism isn't reserved for fictional characters. It lives in the everyday decisions we make to stand up, speak out, show kindness, and do what's right. Thank you, William, for sharing your gift of storytelling and for reminding us that imagination has the power to inspire real change. Until next time, keep writing your story with courage, keep believing in the power of ideals, and keep serving real life tea one conversation at a time. And today's takeaway was being a hero isn't about possessing extraordinary powers. It is about using the gifts you already have to make a positive difference in the lives of others, one choice at a time. And I'll be back at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.